To say hello to the bad guy. I'm your host, Locke, and this is the podcast where we drink, smoke, and bullshit about the life of a historic criminal. Now we're talking outlaws and gangsters. We're not going to be covering too many serial killers. That's just a little bit dark for me, and this ain't no true crime podcast. But honestly, you can't really call this a history podcast because I'm no historian. I'm just a fan that does his research, checks multiple sources, and bullshits about it with his friends. Speaking of my friends, let me introduce you to my co-host today. First with me, I got DC. DC, what's that you drinking over there?
What up, though? So I have Lagunitas IPA.
Oh.
New one for me, but one of my favorites.
All right, and you're usually not an IPA drinker, right?
Correct. I'm more of a stout drinker, but I like the occasional IPA.
Me too. Like I prefer dark beers, but Bell's Too Hardened.
Yes.
It's a good staple.
Delicious.
Also with me today, I got Bugs.
How'd it do?
All right, what are you drinking on that?
I got the old-fashioned Kentucky bourbon, some Red Stag, on the Han Solo ice cubes.
See, so a little bit old school, but then you throw it on the Han Solo ice cubes just to dork it up a little.
Why not?
No, I like it. And then I'm going with the Edmund Fitzgerald Great Lakes Porter.
You said the Eddie Fitz.
Nope, and I never will. I will always say the Edmund Fitzgerald. Don't make me play the song. So it's the dark beer that got me into dark beers. It's classic.
Not my taste.
That's a good thing about craft beers now. They got something for everyone. So now, before we get started, I got to make sure we say thank you to Sixfo Sueno for allowing us to use his song for the intro music. He's a local Detroit rapper. He's a talented kid. So follow him on social media. Subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's got, what's the new song he's got out?
Extreme Medium Freestyle.
It's really good. And that one, the video is pretty clever too.
I was going to say, it's unique. It's not something you see all the time.
So it's definitely worth a watch. Today, the bad guy we're going to be covering is John Ashley.
This ain't negotiation time. This is Scarface, final scene, fucking bazookas under each arm. Say hello to my little friend.
I love how the bad guys always have just the nicest name. John Ashley. You know, he sounds like we've had a couple guys that were like encyclopedia salesmen or something. He sounds like one of those guys.
Some dude that's on the corner with the newspaper you see every Sunday. Hey, John.
John Ashley. You can't get too much more classic than that. It's like if
you see, but then he has that sweet nickname, the Swamp Bandit. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's John Ashley, a.k.a. the Swamp Bandit, a.k.a. the King of the Everglades.
Like, did he rob people in swamps, or did he throw the bodies in the swamps?
Yeah, I would say you know, do a little bit of crime and, you know, take a couple people out to the swamp, let them get eaten up by some crocodiles and alligators, get rid of the evidence.
Well, Florida, that'd be the alligator. Is there crocodiles in Florida too, or is it just alligators?
You know, see, I'm not smart enough to know the difference, so I just threw them both in there.
I was going to say, I feel like there's both. It's just different parts.
Cover all bases.
Shotgun effect. If you say them both, you're going to get it right.
Exactly.
I'm going to go out here on a limb, though. I believe Florida is alligators, and then, like, California and stuff is, like, crocodiles.
Well, because I got to break it down to the only thing I know, which is college football.
The Florida Gators.
Yeah.
So
I didn't want to say it, but that's what I was going up with, too.
I could do that math. John Hopkins Ashley, he was born on March 19th, 1888 in Fort Myers, Florida. He was one of 9 children, but the youngest of 5 boys. His father, Joe Ashley, was a hunter, a fisherman, and a trapper. So they grew up kind of a poor working class family. And his dad always stressed that the working class, the real salt of the earth people, and the rich people weren't to be trusted. The banks weren't to be trusted.
That's right. Don't trust them. But I guess we at least were right on the right track with Florida. So, you know, kind of that swamp nickname gave it away.
Yeah, definitely. John Ashley being the youngest of 5 brothers, the brothers were always close, including the first time that he ever got arrested as a teenager. He was arrested for recklessly brandishing a firearm, and his 4 brothers surrounded the police and pulled their guns on him and told him that they had to let their baby brother go, and the police just let him go. And that's how he got off his first crime.
That's pretty gangster. Right off rip. That's solid. You said as a teenager this happened, right?
Yeah, that was his first arrest. He was a teenager.
Yeah, I'm noticing another thing. A lot of these guys usually come from big families, and, you know, a lot of this stuff is kind of the family business, or they use the family business as a cover. But yeah, I would definitely say that's pretty gangster. Brothers got your back, surround the police. Yeah, I would probably have lived a life of crime also.
Right.
Now, he grew up in the backwoods country along the Caloosahatchee River in Buckingham, Florida, until they moved to West Palm Beach, where he spent most of his time in the Everglades, and he eventually became a better trapper and hunter than his father. So his father was better than all his brothers, and he was better than his dad.
So I guess my question there would be, of course, I would love to understand what West Palm Beach looked like back in the 1800s, because we know what it is now. It's really nice, but I'm gonna guess back in the 1800s, there was pretty much nothing there and all swamps.
Right, because he went there and he became a better hunter and trapper and stuff. So I imagine like what you're saying is more swamps and not what we thought of.
Well, yeah, that area was definitely, it wasn't as swampy as the Everglades, but it was the area just out of the Everglades, so it definitely wasn't the developed area it was now.
It was their suburbs.
Right, it was where you could live to not be physically in the swamp. But
Which makes sense, because a lot of your areas that end up being kind of the high end areas of a city or a metropolitan area, it's usually because you can get the land pretty cheap initially, and build on it. And what better way to hide those bodies?
Yeah.
on December 29th, 1911, the body of DeSoto Tiger, who was a Seminole trapper and the son of a Cow Creek tribal chief, was found in the Lake Okeechobee, shot in the back.
He's out there messing with John Ashley's traps. John Ashley wasn't having it.
DeSoto Tiger being the son of a Seminole chief, and there's Seminole Indians, they were a big population in that area of Florida at the time. Honestly, they weren't well regarded, but with his father being a chief, it became a really big deal, so there was a large investigation. And in the investigation, what they found is that DeSoto Tiger was last seen en route to the market in a canoe with John Ashley and a canoe full of otter hides. They found two fur traders called the Grisham brothers at the market. Now, the otter hides were easy to track down because they had Seminole markings that were easy to locate from the other otters. And they reported buying $1,200 worth of otter hides from John Ashley, which is about $32,000 worth today.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
He did it so he can cash the money.
The last person he was seen with was John Ashley, and John Ashley was last seen selling his otter hides. He became the chief suspect.
John Ashley wasn't a very bright man in this particular circumstance. You go out in a canoe with the man, he ends up shot in the back, and you come back selling his catch. We're gonna go with not very smart. But one thing I did pick up on, going back to your college theme, college sports, Florida State Seminoles. Florida Gators. I just want to throw that in there.
See, but you got to think about this. He also has 4 brothers that will pull up and get him out of any situation. So, I mean, at that point, you can get pretty ballsy with whatever you want. So.
Very true.
The sheriff at the time was Sheriff George B. Baker. He had a lead on where John Ashley was hiding out in the Everglades. So he sent 2 deputies, S.A. Barfield and Bob Hannon, to go take him into custody. Now, when they showed up at John Ashley's campsite, his oldest brother, Bob Ashley, got the drop on him, pulled a gun on them, disarmed them both. John Ashley was quoted as telling them to tell Sheriff Baker not to send any more chicken-hearted men with rifles or they're apt to get hurt.
Wow.
See, so I was right. Them brothers, man. Them brothers are crazy.
Just think about how things were back in those days. It's like when you watch the old school movies like Tombstone and things of that sort, and guys really would do, the posses were bigger than law enforcement at that time. You try and do something like that now. 2 deputies come to the house, disarm and send word back to the chief, hey, send some real men instead of these chicken hearts. It probably won't turn out well for
I was going to say, with better minutes, we're in Michigan. California will be hearing about this incident like within 2 days.
True.
Like back then it was a little bit different. You could do whatever you wanted and kind of slide under the radar.
Well, they would immediately, you're going to have the local police backing, you're going to get the SWAT team, they're going to bring in the state boys. I mean, if you get too crazy, they'll bring in the National Guard.
It will be an issue.
Yes. they're not going to say, hey, well, I'm not going back there.
Hey, I think he made his point. Let's just stay on this side of the wall.
Well, that would have been the game plan, except those pesky Seminoles didn't want to let it go. Like, they were really upset about their murdered son. They put a lot of pressure to bring John Ashley in, and he eventually left. So he went on the run for a few years. In his time on the run, he spent a couple years in New Orleans. He did some time as a logger in Seattle, and he robbed a bank in Canada.
Wow. So New Orleans made sense. Similar area, everything than Florida, but Seattle's completely different.
Yeah.
And then Canada, I would have never guessed it.
Jumped around a lot.
Well, and that's at a time when travel was pretty difficult. It's not like you could just catch a Southwest flight, pop over from area to area. So,
Well, he's pretty good at trapping. He probably gets money very quickly. Knows how to.
right, that's a time where that was a very applicable skill.
Right.
He didn't do well with being on the road, though, being on the run. Having heard the stories about the Ashley brothers standing up to police, they kind of became folk heroes. And when word got back to him, what they decided is he didn't want to be on the run no more. And they felt like there was no way a hometown jury, they were never going to convict him of killing a Seminole. Like, it just wasn't going to happen. So he came back home and turned himself in.
Makes sense, especially if the Seminoles were not, very well liked in the area. And then, as you said, you probably have, your regular people. If his brothers, have a reputation in that area, you have the people that are scared. You have the people that are friends. And then you have the people that don't like the Seminoles. Now, that part of the law still works the same today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like Tupac said, some things will never change.
Exactly.
It's just the way it is. I mean, because now we're talking over a century ago at this point. And, yeah, same issues, really.
Yes.
The local
2020, though, it's going to be different.
New year, new world. Local prosecutors agreed with him that there was no way a hometown jury was going to convict him. So he moved for a change of venue and petitioned it with the judge and got it. They changed it to Miami, which was a much different makeup of people, because where they were at was more of a swamp area. Miami was more of a destination where people from back east would move to. So they weren't the backwoods, good old boy network wasn't as prominent in Miami.
So it was a little bit more city instead of a little bit more country. So they probably had a better chance. Some out of town folks and some different people that may have moved there, not accustomed to the old way of doing things, where they felt like maybe they can get a conviction. But since we're here talking about him, I'm pretty sure this story is going to get interesting.
That's always been a thing that I think is funny about Florida. The further south you go in Florida, the more northern it gets.
Yes.
And the more north you go into Florida, the more down south it gets.
Yes.
Well, because you got to figure Florida is a long state. So when the higher it is up in Florida, that's connected to all the southern states. So that's where them people are used to. They're comfortable. The northern people, they want the beach. They want that Miami Vice life,
Exactly.
They want the nice ocean view.
Yeah.
Well, and they're snowbirds. They're there half the time.
Mm-hmm.
After hearing the prosecutor's plan, Bob Ashley started working on an escape plan. And one day, when Sheriff Baker's son, Robert C. Baker, was escorting him to his cell, he broke away, ran through an unlocked door, climbed a 10-foot fence, and escaped.
Inside job, anybody? That sounds a little bit convenient.
So his plan,
A little too easy.
His escape plan was to run. Okay.
Well, you have to figure, if there's an unlocked door and a fence that's only 10 feet tall, I would say I'm probably I would accept that plan. Walk through the door, run through the door. You figure a 10-foot fence, if you're running, that's a run, a hop, and you probably can get over with just a hop onto the fence and one lift over. So I would say, yeah, that's a pretty
You even got time to high five that guard to unlock the door for you.
Exactly.
Well, and you're talking about, he's a fairly young, athletic guy at the time. He probably
Exactly.
pulled that off. Having escaped prison, he was fully on the run, fully an outlaw, and they were pushing for him hard. So he then started what was known as the Ashley Gang. The John Ashley Gang included 4 of the 5 Ashley brothers, the dad Joe Ashley, but the primary gang was John Ashley was the leader. His brother Bob Ashley was like his right-hand man, There was a Chicago mobster named Kid Lowe who came to Florida to hide out from getting in trouble in Chicago, and apparently decided his version of hiding out was joining a new gang in Florida.
Well, from the previous stories that I've heard before, it's how that goes. You move away and then pick up some other dirty work, and now you're back in the same life.
I mean, when you develop certain skills and you move to a new area, there's always people that need those skills. Skills like killing people, robberies, whatever's needed.
At this time, John Ashley also met the love of his life. He spent the rest of their life together, eventually as his wife. Her name was Laura Upthegrove, and she was also known as the Queen of the Everglades. Now, if you see at the beginning, one of the nicknames, the SWAT Bandit, and then the King of the Everglades, I wasn't able to find any reference to him being called King of the Everglades by himself. What it seems like it was more, she was the Queen of the Everglades, and once they got together, people would call them the King and the Queen of the Everglades.
Right.
But it was never like, oh, he's the king. Do you get what I'm saying?
So
Yes.
wait, previously to her life, she was in that kind of life before she met him?
Well, when she met him, she was 23 years old. She'd been married twice already. Her family, there was like a local beach called Up the Grove Beach. So like her family had been there for a long time, but didn't have any money or anything. It was just a name. They were just a family that had been around a long time. She was notoriously not very pretty. She was always known to be seen carrying a 38 on a holster, like a cowboy style.
Mm-hmm.
And she would drive. They set up a network of hideouts in the Everglades, and she would drive through the trails at night with no headlights as a warning system whenever people would come looking for them, that they could move from hideout to hideout. And then she was in charge of most of casing the banks when they would move into bank robbery, and she usually operated as a getaway driver.
See,
So that's pretty sweet. He married in and kind of inherited her name a little bit. That's interesting.
nice, but yeah, I think they had it right. See, a lot of times you have people that get married because of looks and because they like somebody. No, marriage is a business agreement. He found somebody that was good for business. That's why they stayed together.
He seen her carrying that 38 with a little lip in. She's like, I'm in love.
Yeah. Look, I don't care how she looks.
Hey,
She's never not strapped, and if you've seen her drive, I'm in love.
exactly.
Laura Upthegrove was also known whenever he would get locked up, she kind of stepped in to the leadership role with the gang a lot of the time too.
That's right. Business, second in command.
Yeah.
He found a great second in command that knew how to take care of business, knew how to take charge in his absence. I mean, hey, I'm in envy right now.
Sounds like a keeper.
Kid Lowe, Florida seemed pretty country to him, so he thought, I was in Chicago robbing banks, and this is pretty podunk, so we should be able to rip through this really, really, really easy. Their first robbery, they robbed a FEC train in 1915. Because this is still early 1900s, automobiles were fairly rare, and there was still a lot more train robbing, like
Yes.
the cowboy-style train robbing. So the Ashley brothers robbed the train. They got away. When they got back to the hideout, what Kid Lowe realized, now he had robbed a lot of banks, but he had never robbed a train, and he had never worked with people that weren't professional criminals.
Yes.
He'd always work with mobsters. These were kind of just guys. And what it turned out was when they got on the train, every one of the Ashley brothers secured their cart and took lookout. And then when they all left, they had
Grab the money.
Yeah, they hadn't made plans in advance on who was supposed to grab the money. So they got back to the hideout and nobody had grabbed any money at all. So their first robbery technically was a breaking and entering because they didn't really rob anything.
But hey, it was a successful one. They did it.
That's right. You gotta crawl before you walk. Sometimes, you have to stage a robbery and then walk away from it just to know you can do it.
Right.
We want to rob you, but only a little bit. Just kind of.
We know we could have had we taken that money. It would have been a robbery. So their next robbery, they robbed a bank in Stuart, Florida. Now it was a successful robbery. They got away with $4,500, which is about over $100,000. But they robbed it in the daytime. And down south, most people are heavily armed, so it turned into a big shootout in the streets. In the shootout, Kid Lowe fired a shot that ricocheted off the car and went through John Ashley's jaw and came out his right eye. He lost his eye, and he was too hurt to keep going, and he knew he was slowing the group down. So he told his brothers, they'd never had that much money. He told them just to keep the money and drop them off because he was going to slow them down and just let them get away. And he got caught because he was by himself, shot in the eye, needed medical attention. So the police caught John Ashley after getting shot in the eye at the Stewart bank robbery.
Wow. Yeah, that well, we know one thing. Of course, he was a true general, not in the sense of what we have now, but back in those days. So he's like, hey guys, you got everything. Go, leave me. I'll be here. But yeah, somehow I would have been worried about bleeding to death. I can't see. I can't talk. I'm gonna say you're gonna have to take me with you. I'm not staying behind on this one. We're all getting caught.
I was gonna say that's a pretty savage move to make that decision. That kind of car, man. That's back in the day when it was all metal. Like to have that big of a ricochet to do that. Like nowadays, these cars are aluminum. The cars will just eat those bullets.
It would either absorb right into the panel or go straight through. But yeah, we're 1900s, real metal cars.
It's like that cartoon. He shoots it and hits it, ding, like off the.
It's luckily it didn't keep ricocheting around in there and hit somebody else.
Very true. Very true.
The police held him, and it was a huge deal, especially with the Seminole tribe, that they finally had John Ashley in custody again. On June 2nd, 1915, Bob Ashley attempted to break John out of jail. So he shot Deputy Wilbur Hendrickson point blank in the head and took the keys. But in the ensuing shootout, before he was able to get to John, he shot another officer named J.R. Riblett, but then was shot and killed himself.
Wow. You know, one thing I noticed, it sounds like these guys, although they are very brave and gangster, they don't seem to be very good at planning things out. The plots don't seem to be well thought out. So, you know, going as one man to break your brother out of jail, get into a shootout with the police that's obviously going to be there and get killed.
Well, I feel like you said they're very brave and gangster, and I agree. They've proven a lot. However, doesn't sound like they're well educated, so all that braveness and stuff might just not because they're tough. It's just probably because I don't know. Let's just go shoot our way out of this. Like,
hey, shoot them.
Just don't know any other way.
Well,
They're not logical thinkers.
I didn't write it all down because I didn't know if we were going to cover it or not. But also in that prison break, he went in by himself, but the other gang members had left him behind a stolen car to escape with. Part of the problem that it failed and turned into a shootout was he wasn't able to drive the type of car that they left. So
Yeah.
he tried to kidnap one of the officers to make them drive the car, and that's how he ended up getting killed in the shootout.
That's hilarious. That's like, you know, in today's day and time, one of the best theft deterrents you can have as a vehicle is a manual, because almost nobody drives a manual anymore, and they're pretty much becoming obsolete where a lot of manufacturers aren't even making them anymore. So I would love to know what kind of car it was back then that, like, you know, he wasn't skilled enough to drive.
It was just any car. They're used to horses. Couldn't even do it.
Well, this thing has an engine. I don't know how to use that.
Well, now there is a specific, like, that's kind of funny, but it is 1915, so I'm imagining it's not a manual versus automatic. It probably all had to be manual.
Yes.
But I'm assuming maybe it was a different type. Like, what is it, the 3 on a tree, or the...
It was a wind up, and he was...
I just spit some moonshine on this and it goes, right?
I mean, we're not even talking about the old school Al Capone cars that you were hanging on the running boards. We're not even to those yet. So yeah, maybe he didn't know how to crank it, but somehow he didn't know how to. He should have had Laura Updegrove driving, probably.
That's right.
But yeah, he got killed in the shootout. After 2 deputies were killed, putting John Ashley in prison kind of became the priority over pleasing the Seminole tribe, and they thought they had better evidence to convict him of the Stewart bank robbery than they did of the DeSoto murder. So he signed a plea that they would drop the charges on the DeSoto murder if he pled guilty to the robbery of the Stewart bank. So on November 23rd, 1916, he was sentenced to 17 years in Rayford State Penitentiary for the Stewart bank robbery. And nobody ever did time for the DeSoto Tiger murder.
I wonder back in those days, what was the difference in how many years you would get for one versus the other?
That's interesting.
Well, I mean, because one is murder, but it is Florida. You know, maybe the bank robbery was the premier time.
Yeah, and I guess at that point they said, let's go with the strongest case and at least we can get them for something, and try and get back, what happened to our guys. So that's another one of those things that kind of still happens today. It's like, a guy could have done multiple crimes, but, if we can get him on something we know we can stick to, we'll take that and not necessarily worry about the other one.
At Rayford State Penitentiary, he got a glass eye that he ended up wearing for the rest of his life. He was a model prisoner for the next 16 months until he was able to get transferred to a roadwork crew. And then on March 31st, 1918, John and a fellow bank robber named Tommy Maddox escaped from the roadwork crew.
Of course. So we just got finished talking about how his crew wasn't the brightest. I don't think law enforcement were the brightest because this guy has a history of escaping, and you put him on a roadwork crew. Doesn't sound very... And his brother already tried to break him out once before. Doesn't sound very smart.
Or maybe it's another inside job. We
True.
never know. We never know.
Very
However,
true.
this guy can run for sure. He's a very good runner.
But his go-to plan again. If they stop looking for 1 second, I'm gonna run.
Just go.
After escaping on March 31st, 1918, he got back to his gang, and they just kicked back into normal action. 1920 was a big year for John Ashley. Sheriff George Baker passed away, and his son Robert C. Baker took over as the new sheriff in the area, and that's also the year Prohibition hit. With the Ashleys knowing the Florida area, they were able to dominate Prohibition. The reason they did so well, once they got into like Prohibition crimes, they just progressed and escalated like quickly. So they started off with their own moonshine stills and distilleries that were ran by his dad Joe Ashley and his partner Andrew Miller, and they had those like set up from Central Florida to Palm Beach. And then him and his brothers Frank and Ed, they would drive to the Bahamas and then drive the money. So they were doing like rum running, like bringing in from the other country. And then eventually they just got better where on top of that, anybody else that tried to bring it through, they got into hijacking, and then they got into piracy. And sometimes they'd mix them both, because what they were able to do is take their boats down the Everglades to cut people off at roads to hijack them.
That's the start of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Nice. Yeah, I figure, they get into that, and, what I probably would have did was, just start a little bit of extortion because, it gets tiresome stopping these people and stealing stuff. Let them through and just give me a piece of the money. If you want to come through here, you have to pay us. So, if not, get found in the swamps.
Exactly. So what you're saying, they're starting to use their brains. They're catching on to this criminal life.
If they do it like that, like well, then who am I going to rob in my boat?
Hey.
And who knows? They probably can't even drive the boats. They don't know how.
I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but as soon as they started the Ashley gang originally, one of the brothers, Billy, was the only one that didn't get involved and never, he died of old age. Never got into crime, never got into family business, anything.
What kind of brother is that? I would have disowned him.
He was a family disgrace.
Even the dad was in on it. How can you get out of here? You're dead to me, son.
How do you be a dad and join a gang that your son runs?
Well, let me say this. Somehow, John had to be very brilliant compared to everybody else. It's not just that the dad got involved with the gang that the son runs. It's the youngest son. Everybody got involved. So he was a smart cookie compared to the rest of them. To get all of your older brothers and your dad to basically follow behind you and your ugly wife with the 38. He was probably the brightest of them. He probably went to the 3rd grade instead of the 1st.
Probably got some more good, some experience from all of the older brothers. The 2nd brother gets to learn from his brother and his dad. By the time you got 4 or 5, you learn a little bit from everybody. You take all that information in.
Well, that would make sense because it said he became a better hunter and trapper than his dad.
Yes.
So it's like you get to skip the bullshit. You skip the learning the hard way and just get the solid information and just learn.
Absolutely.
Makes sense. John Jones is the youngest brother, isn't he?
He is? No.
He's the middle.
Yeah, he's the middle. Tyler? I forget his other brother, but he has a younger brother.
Chandler.
Chandler, that's his name. Chandler's the youngest.
He's still the baddest, though. John Jones is probably the baddest
Yes.
dude on the planet.
Yes.
Everything was running good with the moonshine operation, running the multiple phases until randomly in June of 1921, a police officer got a lead on a car that was going to be carrying alcohol. Pulled him over because they knew he had a car full of liquor, but he was on the run for the bank robbery still, so took him into custody in June of 1921. And then several months later, in October 1921, his brothers Ed and Frank were left seen leaving Bimini in the Bahamas with a shipment of liquor, and they were never seen again.
Wow. So they just disappeared, huh? With all the liquor. So it's almost like John's nickname came back and bit his brothers. I'm pretty sure they got lost. I'm doing air quotes right now. Lost in the
He's
swamp.
doing visual jokes.
Well, so what do you think? You think that they didn't get lost because they got killed, or do you think they didn't get lost because they just ran off with the liquor?
I'm gonna guess they got killed. I don't think that it seems like the brothers, the whole group was pretty tight knit. So I don't think they would have ran off on their brother. If it's possible they may have disappeared if they maybe thought the brother wasn't gonna come home or something. But other than that, I think they would have stayed with their brother.
I think I'm with DC on this one. Maybe instead of dying, they got like convicted, but they were just low level, no name, so it doesn't get publicized. But like maybe they got picked up and took into jail. Not even the cops, not even knowing that they're part of the Ashley gang or something.
Could be. We know a lot of times murders come about because of botched robberies, where it wasn't intended to murder the person. They went in for a robbery, something went astray, and end up with dead bodies.
I was
And
gonna say
if you're-
they probably try to rob them. Didn't know the Ashley brothers ain't no hoes. Put up a fight, so don't
The
probably put up a
shootout.
fight. Yeah,
So this time it seemed the Ashley brothers seemed like the gang was going to kind of fall apart. John was in prison. Bob had died trying to break him out. Now the other two brothers were missing. And then while John was in prison, his 17-year-old nephew, who was one of his closest nephew growing up, like Hanford always looked up to him. He was 17 years old and he joined the gang and then kind of immediately assumed like a leadership role. And then first thing he did was restaff the gang he brought in one of his buddies that he grew up with, a guy that was named Roy Young Matthews, and then Clarence Middleton. Clarence Middleton was from Chicago, came down to Florida and got thrown in prison. And while he was in Florida, he met a guy named Ray Shorty Lynn, who was an Army deserter, and they broke out together, and they pretty much hung out together, for the rest of their life, and they both joined the Ashley gang together. So immediately set the gang right back in motion.
So it's like the next generation kind of picked up the ball, so to speak. But yeah, it sounds like, they didn't have a long run. I know it'll sound funny what I'm saying, but that's the sad thing about it. I would have hoped for a longer spree of crime for the original Ashley gang.
Yeah,
I agree.
Well, we started. Well, that's about 5 years, right? If we end in October 1921, when the two brothers disappeared, he broke out of prison in 1916. Oh no, 1918. So yeah, that is only 3 years.
That's a short run.
Yeah, 3 years is a pretty short run.
They did get a lot done though, so it depends.
They probably had a really good organization of money with the whole prohibition. It's one of those things where sometimes a law that can be bad for certain people create a whole new industry. So they probably made a pretty penny, but they just didn't have enough time to spend it.
Well, what we're going to take a quick smoke break, so refill your drink. We'll be back in a minute. So once Hanford Mobley assumed a leadership role, the gang started firing again on all cylinders. And they had all the moonshining operations up and running, and then started hitting banks again while John was still in prison, including they robbed the bank in Stewart a second time in May of 1922, where Hanford went in first disguised as a lady, and they got out of the bank with $8,000 and all got away clean.
Wow.
How much was that in today's dollars?
I don't know, but 4,500 was about 100,000. So
About 200,000.
double that.
Okay.
And everybody left with all their eyes.
Wow.
Yes.
So that was a better game plan.
Sounds solid, especially dressing up like a lady back in those days, I'm gonna guess that was pretty revolutionary.
Yeah.
I want to know.
Next level.
I want to know if Hanford Mobley, dressed as a lady, was still smaller than Laura up the grove. He's
Probably.
Still prettier.
Probably.
Well, that's how he got away with it. He walked in with her. No?
So, in 1923, John Ashley escaped from prison for the last time when he climbed through an open window in an unlocked janitor's closet.
Another inside job.
What a
It really sounds
coincidence.
exactly. It really sounds like somebody's leaving a lot of doors unlocked for this gentleman.
What is he doing in prison to where he's getting all these favors? Or unless, like you said, the deputies aren't that bright, but seems like, a lot of coincidences for sure.
Maybe he got the moonshine in.
Ooh.
It does seem like he's like a gerbil or something. If you give him 1 square inch, he will run away. The window in the janitor's closet. I'm out. Bam.
Done.
That's all I need. I couldn't escape through an open window in a janitor's closet. I'd just be like,
Absolutely not.
Someone better go shut that window. It's cold.
You
First
step on
of
the
all-
sink, drop a mop, somebody opens the door, you're like halfway out, like,
Break the sink.
I'm going to guess that those windows are small, and I don't think that this belly caused by this delicious beer that I've been drinking will make it through the window.
What was the name of that beer again?
Oh, I've actually have another one now.
Okay.
I've hopped on, and I'm going with the Edmund Fitzgerald. I will not pronounce it Eddie Fitz because I don't want to get thrown off of the podcast.
No, be a hipster. Just go ahead and do it.
No.
With John Ashley back out, and Hanford already has the gang rolling good. Like, that's like when the Patriots pick up the top free agent or something. Like when Randy Moss drops onto the New England Patriots. You know, so the gang's already up and running good, and John Ashley breaks out of prison, is back in the show.
Yeah, it sounds like now they might have the right personnel to go on that run that I thought they were going to go on before. So let's see what they have in store. I'm excited.
To get the ball rolling. This is why
Exactly.
we're going to find out why we're talking about him now.
Yes.
The Ashley Gang comeback tour.
Exactly.
So
Season 4.
the first robbery back, they did a Florida East Coast train, the FEC train, which was like the big deal at the time because Florida was way on the outskirts at that time, so everything ran by the train. A police report quoted someone as having John Ashley carrying 238s and saying, "Ladies, you can keep your pocketbooks. We're just robbing the menfolk."
Haha. Well, at least he was a gentleman, take the money from the men. The women are okay. I like
It's
it.
very classy.
Exactly.
One of those 38s was his old ladies.
She probably told him before they got out, the car, the horse, whatever they were on. That's how he got the second 38. She probably put it, listen, don't touch the ladies. Now take this with you.
November of 1923, they had a big bank robbery, the Pompano bank robbery, where they got $23,000 in cash and securities. At this time, John Ashley left behind a bullet with one of the hostages at the bank. He left a bullet for Sheriff Baker and told him that I have another one for him if he ever makes it out to the Glades. And
Wow.
that became a signature of him and Robert Baker bickering between each other between the robberies, and Sheriff Baker would do it like in the press and stuff like that.
I'm still stuck on the 23,000. That's a lot of money. Going back to our rough calculations, so 23,000 had to be what, like
We're pushing-
800,000 or something.
We're pushing on the top half of $1 million.
They're
Exactly.
big time now.
Oh yeah.
Well, and
Oh yeah.
imagine being that hostage having to tell that message to the sheriff. Like, he said, like, I'll just be like, I'm okay.
Here's your bullet.
Here's the bullet. There's a message that goes with it.
Well, that's kind of his thing, though. He's been leaving messages from the beginning, right? He told his dad, "Don't send no more guys after me."
Yeah.
That's true.
John Ashley don't give a fuck about the Bakers.
Not one bit.
He's probably the originator of one-liners.
Last time John Ashley seen Bob Baker, he ran away and escaped. In 1924, John and Hanford stole a sea skiff, which is kind of like the elevated swamp boats that you see. They took a stolen sea skiff and they raided the Bahamas, where they got $8,000 from 4 different liquor warehouses in Bimini. This marked the first time in a century and a half that American pirates had attacked a British Crown colony.
Wow.
That's how you up the ante right there, Take it international. Really get your name out there.
I'm gonna say that's headline. That's top of the press on the newspapers and stuff. That's big time.
I was just gonna say, figure back in those days though, it makes sense that you would do something like that and probably have a good chance of getting away with it because, as we know, just within the U.S., there wasn't a lot of communication really detailed with different departments, authority departments. So now you go to a whole nother country that you can get to on a swamp boat, a whole nother territory, and it's like, yeah, we robbed them, and yeah, it's a bad thing, but what are you gonna do? We're here in the U.S.
Right.
Right, because the Bahamas are not going to invade America chasing down the Ashley brothers.
Exactly.
Or not even John and Hanford chasing them. Doesn't have the same ring as the Ashley brothers. They did so much robbing and hijacking that at one point, like what you said earlier, people either just started paying protection or they just wouldn't come at all. And they had to consistently work on the bank robberies because people just stopped. The pirating business was done just because they were too good at it. Nobody would come over there. So they'd either just pay protection or they stop. Like they just got all the moonshine business.
Wow.
Exactly. That's why you have to think forward. So if you can't be too good at what you do, because people won't oppose you anymore. So you got to find a way to let certain people through, and grease those palms and keep the money flowing. And that was one of the things that the mob got really good at. And you look at a lot of the mobsters telling stories now, and it's like, so I'm a mobster and you're a mobster, and you go to shake somebody down, and they're absolutely scared. So what do? They don't want you to shake them down, so they come to me for protection. Now they pay me for protection. I make a phone call because we're all a part of the same team in the long run. Hey, they're protected now. You can't touch them anymore. You can't touch them, but money's still coming back to the family. Makes sense.
Tale as old as time.
Yes.
So Sheriff Baker, he was quoted in a newspaper that he vowed to keep John Ashley's glass eye as his watch fob. You guys know what a watch fob is?
It's like the pocket watch thing.
The counterweight to a pocket watch.
Okay.
So whenever somebody keeps a pocket watch on a chain, it's what goes on the other end of the chain. So
pretty weak, man. You think you'd have all these one-liners that's getting thrown at you, like you start in your life, and you're just like, I'm gonna put his glass eye on my watch. Like, come on.
Well, see, that's what happens with nepotism. When you look at the difference, John Ashley is a dude that started a gang that his dad and brothers joined. Bob Baker had a job basically handed down to him from his dad.
It has to feel bad. Like your life is based around chasing a guy that your father chased, and your father died, and now it's your job, and the guy keeps getting away. At that point in time, I'm probably just gonna hire him.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and I'm gonna make you assistant deputy.
Right?
Give me some of that moonshine money.
If it was about 20 years prior, that's what they used to do. In the 1800s, whenever we cover any outlaw, like in the 1800s, anybody in the Wild West, they always at some point were a sheriff or a lawman. Because the difference was very little at that time.
Makes sense.
Sheriff Baker could never catch up with John because there's a thing called the Grapevine Telegraph of the Glades. Basically just meant like the good old boy network. Anywhere you try and go. I mean, we already established that they got hideouts.
Yes.
That the Queen of the Everglades can bounce between.
Communications well there. That's
right.
Good.
But he finally got a solid lead that John was going to be hiding an old moonshine cabin 2 miles south of the family homes without his gang, with just his family and not his gang. Now, where this set up, it was supposed to be like an ideal hideout because it had like only one way you can get in and out through the swamp, and it had like short bushes. On January 10th, 1924, Sheriff Baker secured rifles from the Florida National Guard, and he deputized a bunch of civilians to help him go pull out this plan to go catch John Ashley at his hideout. So because you can only sneak so many people in, he had all the deputized civilian surround it to hold him in. so that they could eventually just starve him out, he was able to send in 8 deputies. Now, the 8 deputies, they waited until they could identify that John Ashley was there, and when they spotted John Ashley, right when they went to make their move, and it's not a Dukes of Hazzard episode, this is really what happened. When they went to make their move, they stepped on something and made a noise that made the family dog start barking. When the dog started barking, one of the deputies shot at the dogs. When John Ashley heard the shot, he knew where the deputies were. He shot at the deputies. He shot and killed Sheriff Deputy Fred Baker, who was Sheriff Baker's cousin. But in the shootout that followed, his dad Joe Ashley, his partner Albert Miller were both shot and killed. And then Laura was shot with buckshot. It turned out to be like in her legs and ass. She was shot so bad that she couldn't run away. And they had to leave without her. A lot of the stories say that she was hurt so bad that she was screaming so loud that it kind of distracted them. And that's why John and Hanford were able to run away and escape. And a lot of people say that the reason they were able to get out was she was just screaming so loud that it distracted them.
Wow.
To run away.
Yeah, I would imagine buckshot hurts pretty bad, especially if it sprays up like your whole leg and butt. Yeah, I would say that probably hurt. And, you know, she probably was screaming. It may have been the first time she's gotten shot. It makes sense. But I will say this. I absolutely love how back in the day, you can just kind of make somebody a deputy. Like, hey, I'm going to get bad guys. Hey, any of you guys interested in being a sheriff's deputy? Here you go. Here's a star. You're official. No training. Just give them a gun and give them a star. You're official.
You got extra guns that you just picked up from the National Guard, and you're just going to hand them to people that you just deputized.
Yes.
Right now.
And he still failed. Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
I feel like if you got somebody that you're having a hard time catching because people won't tell on him, to deputize the people that won't tell on him and tell them to surround the place so he can't run away, it sounds like a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
Well, at least one was a cousin.
Yeah.
You got one right.
However, all the bakers seem to be not good at what they do.
Yes.
So, as we found out, the cousin was one of the ones that get shot.
Yes. This is true.
So at this point, it's basically John and Hanford and Hanford's guys. And John refused to leave the area because he wanted to kill Bob Baker for killing his dad, and he wanted to stay in the area long enough he wanted to try and break Laura back out of prison. He wanted to stay in the area, kill Sheriff Baker, and break Laura out of prison. And Hanford didn't think that was a good idea. So what he said, they came up with a plan that they were going to go up to Jacksonville, which is towards the top end of Florida, and hide out there for a while. They came up with a plan for a couple banks that they could rob. When Sheriff Baker gets reelected, he gets sworn in the Jacksonville courthouse.
Okay.
So their plan was to kill him at the Jacksonville courthouse when he got sworn in.
Something else that doesn't sound like a good idea.
Right.
But Sheriff Baker ended up getting a tip. John Ashley had a sister that lived in the Jacksonville area. Her husband gave a tip to Sheriff Baker that they were coming to Jacksonville, when they were going to be coming, the road that they were going to be going down, and at what time. The ambush they set up was on a place, it was called St. Sebastian Bridge in Roseland, Florida, and that was out of Sheriff Baker's jurisdiction. What he had to do was the local sheriff had to run the operation, and he was able to send 3 sheriff's deputies to kind of handle his end of the operation line. They went up to the bridge. What they did was they chained it off and put lanterns. They arrested them. The local sheriffs with 3 of Baker's guys, when they pulled up to the bridge and stopped their cars, they surrounded them with shotguns. And they arrested John Ashley, Shorty Lynn, Clarence Middleton, and Hanford Mobley. And they were all handcuffed and transferred over to Sheriff Baker's deputies.
So this is the reason why none of the sisters were involved in the Ashley gang. They were the weak links. Exactly.
Dang.
You see, he ran around with all his brothers and then his little nephew for over a decade and was just fine. He shot one phone call to his sister, and her husband told on him.
That's a shame. You gotta figure though, John Ashley's getting kind of greedy. Like, come on, man, you keep escaping, you're doing fine. That's a greedy move by him. He should have listened to his nephew.
Especially back in those days, for the amount of money it sounds like they've gotten, and back in those days, I mean, you can change your name by saying, "This is my new name."
Right.
No, my name is Bill. And there's, with the amount of money they have, you can go somewhere and live a very nice life under a new name.
He did it before. Go back to New Orleans.
Canada.
You can still live in a swamp.
That's why I'm saying I feel like he got greedy. It was too personal. He was trying to
Yes.
prove something and slipped up.
Well, what probably made it worse was it was going well. Because every
Yeah.
time he'd fuck with Sheriff Baker, it'd go off, and it's funny, and you see it in the paper, and you're like, haha, I'm dogging this guy. And the next thing you know, you get a little too greedy, and they got shotguns to your head, and what are you going to do?
You
So
gotta look at your nephew and he just looks and says, I told you so. Come on.
So as soon as the local sheriffs left the scene, John Ashley reached for a concealed weapon, and all 4 of them were shot dead.
Possible execution.
All the coroners report that all 4 men were in handcuffs when they were shot.
Probably just had it. They're tired of it. He escaped too many times, so they just want to get rid of him.
Well, we do know this from previous. John doesn't seem to have an issue with getting arrested because I believe he thinks he can escape. So I do find it a little fishy that all of a sudden he would pull a gun right then or, try and take the deputy's gun. So I do find it a little fishy because I think in his mind he probably would have just went to jail like he's done before and then escaped.
And he has all of his inside dudes with him. Like,
Yes,
felt like he could have did it easily. But
I
yeah,
agree.
Bob Baker is just like, no, I'm sick of this. Finally got you.
I'm going to win.
Well, I also think it's a little crazy.
Probably said one cheesy one-liner before he did it.
Bob Baker and his dad chased around the Ashley family for over a decade. One operation, and to bring in a real police force in, they caught them.
What does
True.
that say about you?
Right? Maybe you that terrible at your job that you just could not be. The Ashleys were really embarrassing you that bad.
You know what it is? They probably were in an area where there wasn't a lot of crime and they didn't have to do much, and all of a sudden these Ashleys come along that's a real thorn in their side. And what they'd rather be doing is just sitting back, doing what we're doing right now, talking and drinking a couple beers. But no, these damn Ashleys keep coming and they keep acting up, causing crimes, and breaking out of jail.
When they died, Hanford Mobley, Shorty Lynn, and John Ashley were all buried in the Ashley family cemetery. The cemetery is in the middle of an exclusive residential area called Mariner Sands. So there's a real nice area in the middle of West Palm Beach where, these are like $1 million houses. And they can't touch it because it's a cemetery, but the Ashley family cemetery is in the middle of it.
That's crazy.
What's funny is, it's not funny. Every person that was buried in the cemetery died of a violent death, except for one grandbaby that had died as a child, had died a violent death.
What about that? The one dude, Billy, I believe you said, that didn't get into that life. Was he buried there?
No.
Good question.
He wasn't. He never had anything to do with the family after John broke out of prison the first time.
Okay.
And he died in Pompano, Florida in 1940.
They really disgraced
Sell
him. Yeah.
Sell out.
You don't get buried in the Ashley cemetery with us.
Which is crazy because even Ray Shorty Lynn, who is an army deserter that broke out of prison and joined the gang, they're like, come on in.
I was gonna say, well,
Exactly.
at that point, you're more part of the family, anyways.
Right.
Exactly. You joined the family business.
In the Ashley family cemetery, John Ashley, Ray Lynn, and Hanford Mobley are all buried next to each other. Ray Lynn's headstone says, believed to be Ray Lynn. So it doesn't even say it's for sure him. It says it's believed to be him.
We found the body close enough.
That's some country shit.
Yeah.
Now, what about the dad? When did he? Because he was one of the people arrested, right?
No, he got shot when they were at the hideout. When Baker went to the swamp.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. See, in the cemetery.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Him and Bob.
Got it.
We're both in there. When Sheriff Baker, after he found out his cousin got shot, he burned the houses he burned everybody that was there's property. So he burned Andrew Miller's grocery store, Joe Ashley's house, and Hanford Mobley's house. And I just think it's crazy that all of the Ashleys, the 2 that had houses were the dad and the nephew.
Listen, the rest of them, we don't have time to be stationary. We're on a crime spree right now. We don't need a house. We'll stay at this saloon over here, this speakeasy over there. Who needs a house at that point?
That's true. Everybody else was in. Hanford Mobley didn't join the gang till he was 17. By then, John Ashley had already broke out of prison like twice or something.
Right.
Exactly.
All right. So that's the story of John Ashley.
So say good night to the bad guy. Come on. The last time you're gonna see a bad guy like this again, let me tell you.
So now we got to cast it. So I have the pictures ready. We could look at pictures of John Ashley. Say we got to cast a movie. Who would you cast to play him?
So,
if you got a pre-guess before we look at the pictures.
I did not know this guy's name, so I had to look it up. But the whole time I had an image of this guy that played like the sheriff in Boardwalk Empire. And the guy's name is Michael Shannon.
Michael Shannon. Okay.
Yes. And so that was the image that I had in my head for some reason for John. So I'm going to go with that fella.
Okay.
I know Michael Shannon as he was the KKK guy in Bad Boys 2.
Ah, see, I'll have to go back and watch that.
The one that they get out of prison.
Mm-hmm.
And they. So it's not. Do you got a pre-guess?
I was thinking Ben Affleck's little brother.
Casey Affleck.
Casey.
I could see that. I feel like he would come up with. The Affleck brothers seem to do a bad job with accents. I think he'd do like a Nick Cage-esque terrible job with the accent where it's almost comic book cartoony.
Really?
I mean, I don't know. He'd probably kill it and win an award or something. We have a couple pictures. So this is a glass eye picture of John Ashley. And let's mind you, he died fairly young. So he's died at 36. So it looks like a 36 hard years. But here's a picture.
Definitely.
I would like to say DC kind of hit it spot on with his guess. That's pretty accurate. That's close.
Yeah, I think Michael Shannon would do that pretty good. Well, especially, now check this picture out. This is the picture of him going into Rayford prison before he got his glass eye. He's rocking the patch.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
And actually, that definitely looks like
Michael Shannon?
Yes. I think he definitely could play that role.
Yeah. If Michael Shannon was playing Colonel Sanders, he could be John Ashley.
See, John Ashley, man, he got that
Yes.
class. The white suit. That's the
and
all
the
white.
bow tie.
Right? He's not the black hat. I'm the white hat. I'm the good guy. I'm John Ashley. Now,
My name's Ashley.
this is
John.
a picture of the Ashley gang, as well as John Ashley and the Queen of the Everglades.
Okay, I can.
I feel like she doesn't look as ugly as I expected.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. I can see why maybe for the times maybe she wasn't considered quote unquote attractive. Maybe the way she dressed, or I think in those times women were a little more slender. But yeah, based on this picture, I don't think that she would be labeled that today. I don't think that you put her in a nice outfit. I don't think she would be labeled as ugly.
I was gonna say, well, she's also carrying around a big 38 right in front of her. So
That is true.
most people are kind of like, it's not very ladylike.
That is true.
Right, in southern culture, right, where there's like a lot
Yes.
of dandies and appropriate behavior. Yeah, she's probably definitely deemed unladylike.
Yes, I would agree.
Well, and with 2 divorces.
Yeah.
Now we're not talking about 2
Yes.
divorces in 2020. We're talking about 1915, and she's been divorced twice.
Well, the thing is, too, you have to think how bad that would have been back then. You said she was 23 at that time. So even now, if you've already been divorced twice at 23, that's pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
So you could just imagine it was probably atrocious back then. So based on what both of you all are saying, so maybe what they were talking about, really the look, wasn't the look physically, it was the persona, the embodiment of who she was. It's like,
Right.
oh no, she's not desirable.
Right. Now she ended up, after she got out of prison, and John was already passed away by the time she got out. She was never the same. She went and worked some waitressing job. She seemed like she might have did some small like drug type crimes, but nothing big. And then she eventually committed suicide when she was 30 years old.
Wow,
It's tough.
that it is. It's a short life.
She liked the life out on the Everglades with John Ashley. She wasn't trying to be like she worked as like a waitress and kind of did like regular stuff.
She couldn't find another gangster from the swamps.
Well, at that time, times changed. Probably can't find stuff like that no more.
Right, they're eliminating
True.
the swamps, let alone
Yes.
swamp gangsters. So, and then here is a picture of Hanford Mobley. It's the only known picture of him.
He looks like that guy from Jersey Shore. What's the
Oh.
guy name with like the
Pauly
sli-
D.
Yes, that's who he looks like.
With the blowout. Yeah,
Well,
I can see that.
slap a wig on him. I can see him robbing a bank as a lady.
Yeah, he looks I mean, now I know that he joined the gang at 17 and died at 19. I do feel like I think it's kind of odd that we've all heard of Billy the Kid, but we've never heard of Hanford Mobley because I think his
Well, it's short-lived.
well, so was
Probably
Billy
not
the Kid's when you really look at it. That's the problem
true.
is
I feel like
your gang.
if John came back and didn't take over the gang or was in prison for a little bit longer and he had a little bit more rule, he would have been a bigger name and we'd have heard about him for sure.
He probably would have did well and took it over because at the end of the day, the gang basically turned into his gang with John.
True. True.
So, well, now we have to do the DEFCON scale. We're going to rate them on the traditional DEFCON scale, which is scale of 5 to 1, 1 being the highest. Now, it's important to note that anybody on the scale, this is the Bad Guy podcast, so they're all, it's not like 5 is a saint. So, 5 would be like Lee Murray, your crack dealing, kidnapping robber. 1 would be the Purple Gang, where you're doing multiple wars and massacres. So, on a scale of 5 to 1, of Lee Murray to the Purple Gang, where would you rate John Ashley?
See, this is a tough one because John Ashley himself, at least based on the information we have, didn't do a lot of the killing. His gang did a little bit, but him, of course, the gentleman Tiger, I forget his name.
DeSoto Tiger.
DeSoto Tiger.
Sweet name.
Yes, but most of the rest of the killing with deputies and things of that sort was pretty much his brothers or someone else in the gang. I think he did shoot one of the guys at the cabin.
Fred Baker.
But yeah, it's I gotta give him maybe the only thing I'll say is he probably has more bodies out in the swamp than what we have in the story. I'll give him a solid 4. Give him a solid 4.
All right. I was interested to see where you're gonna go. I was leaning towards 3. I'm gonna go in the middle because I can't really decide. But I felt like for the amount of knowledge and like crew he had to work with, he did a pretty good job. Yeah, I didn't like how he got caught a lot. However, he escaped a lot very well too. He was good at it. So I thought that was interesting. So I'll give him a 3 because he worked with what he had. He did well. However, there's some holes where I feel like you could have did better.
Yeah, I think he definitely was a work in progress in the crime game. I mean, it started off really rough, and they got better, but only through practice.
He dove head first. I'll give him props, I guess. Went for it.
If you like what you do, you never work a day in your life.
That's right.
But I do think, the DeSoto Tiger murder. Look, shooting a cop in a shootout against the cops, I mean, obviously that's not good, but like I said, it's a scale of bad guys. That's kind of what happens in a shootout is people get shot.
Yes.
The DeSoto Tiger shot him in the back in a canoe and stole his otter hides. It's a little scummy. But I still think, honestly, if it wasn't for the DeSoto Tiger murder, I would almost call him a 5 because he seemed like a pretty good criminal, but he just seemed kind of like a good old boy.
Yes.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
I would go with a 4 also. I don't know. I guess we'll go MMA rules. That'd be a majority draw, like a majority 4.
I'll take it.
So we'll go with a DEFCON 4.
And I could agree on it. I just preset before you asked, before I heard DC's logical reasoning, I just preset a 3. That's the first number came to my mind. So
that's the process. That's all you gotta talk it out.
Exactly. But I can agree with a 4. I'm not upset about it.
They're moving in. I say we go to DEFCON 4.
I like it.
All right. Bad Guy Podcast on John Ashley. Either you got anything before we go?
Another good story. I liked it. This one was a little bit different than the other ones I've been involved in. In particular, as mentioned, he really got caught a lot, and it was a little bit of a different road than I would have expected. But I think that's what's great is that a lot of these guys you may not have heard of before, you're going to get a little bit of a different story. And sometimes that story is the reason you haven't heard of them. But they really did a lot of crimes and things here in the U.S. that, make you aware of it. They still would embody the name, gangster or bad guy. So.
And one thing I liked about the story is interesting to like a swamp. Like it's in Florida. It's different. It's not a big city gang. Like, it's these low time, a family. They started it out of the swamp. Like that's kind of cool. It was interesting.
Well, technically their first crime as a family was making the cops let their little brother go.
Yes.
So they came a long way from bullying cops.
That moment, they realized, oh, we can do this, yeah, for sure.
Well, we'll call that a wrap. Thanks for listening.
Deuces.